Sustainable Urban Network.
Hi, I'm Sonja Robinson.
Sun.
Tune in to S.U.N, Sustainable Urban Network, where we all shine together. The guests are hot, and the topics make the mic drop.
S.U.N back to new chapter. Justice now, not after. Clean energy matters. Fossil fuel not flatters. Rooftop solar in the mix is really good for the streets. Electricity needs a big rate relief. We gon' keep it pushing, everything on the sun. Watch the show, we gonna have some fun. Walk the talk if you official, proceed to run. 2020, inequity, wait a ton. Sustainable Urban Network. Justice is on earth. Sustainable Urban Network. Justice is on earth.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining S.U.N, Sustainable Urban Network. You could be anywhere, and we really appreciate that you stopped by to hear our discussion and our topics. And today, it is going down. We're talking about net energy metering solar, and it has been under attack. I have an all-star cast that's going to give you some insight, background, and a path forward of how we can make sure we protect solar customers. So, as we do on all of our shows, I'm going to provide our sun enlightenment as well as give a reflection, which is going to be a quote to this level set our conversation today on sustainable solar energy. It's more specifically rooftop solar. We definitely believe that rooftop solar is a great solution for our climate change as well as providing equity and energy justice. So, our reflection is one of my virtual mentors, and I believe Karina would say the same, Dr. Shalanda Baker. And my quote is, climate change will force us to rethink the way we generate and distribute energy and regulate the system. But how much are we willing to change the system? This unique moment in history provides an unprecedented opening for a deeper transformation of the energy system and thus an opportunity to transform society. And that's from her book, Revolutionary Power, will show us that pathway forward. So now we want to provide our sun enlightenments. And our sun enlightenment is inspired by one of our modern thought teachers, Don Miguel Ruiz. And our sun enlightenments are: 1, be responsible with your resources. 2, take the state of our social and climate justice seriously. 3, don't wait for others, do your part. 4, and when you do, give your best effort and from a loving place. Now, on our topic today, which is solar or net energy metering solar, for our listeners, I want to make sure that, and our listeners are actually on KNSJ 89.1 FM. Definitely got to make sure I give that plug. And our topic focus of net energy metering solar will hopefully we want to bring awareness on this issue as well as on the initiative in general to protect rooftop solar. Also, secondly, how does net energy metering solar affect climate justice and the climate justice movement? 3, how can our listeners support this movement? And 4, and lastly, why is this important and why should you care? And so I also want to give a disclaimer that the commentary and information on Sustainable Urban Network is not endorsed by Protect Our Communities Foundation or KNSJ, rather personal views of those that's actually on the show. We also do not own the copyrights of the topic song theme that you will hear a little bit later. For those that are joining for the first time, you're saying, what in the world is Sustainable Urban Network? So we believe collectively, we are a collective community that we believe that we can address issues that will help improve the quality of lives for the communities that have been underserved and overlooked. And we can address our racial, social, economic justice, and equity through the lens of environmental and climate justice through public policy. And we believe collectively that we can help scale up our neighborhoods. And what I want to do right now is just move really quickly because this topic is going to be good. And you guys, there are some things that was going down on net energy net energy metering solar. And this panel and this crew was on top of it. And I can't wait to start this conversation. So before I do, I just want to give some quick sun news as well as give some quick sun announcements. And then we're going to move into the topic theme song. But before we do that, those that have college loans, I know you guys heard that President Biden is providing that loan forgiveness. And those that don't have college loans, just be happy that your neighbor will get loan forgiveness. That's what I have to say on that. Now, oh my goodness, the water crisis. The water crisis in Mississippi. I really hope that that they can use their infrastructure bill that was passed earlier this year, and that's what it's for, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, to really change and to transform their infrastructure so there will be drinkable water very soon in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi more specifically. Now, I know you guys, especially my climate avengers, heard and are very well known about California's new policy passed on not selling gas powered cars. So, for those who didn't hear, it is factual that the California Air Resources Board asserted that in 2026, which is around the corner, they're projecting that 35% of our newly purchased passenger cars will be zero emissions, and we'll double that in 2030 to 68%. And then by 2035, it will be 100% requirement of non-emission passenger cars, all electric. So that's really, really a positive movement in the right direction. All right, Southern California, the heat is on. And I just want to give a quick tip for those that are heat vulnerable. And so there is some heat vulnerability in the factor here, and that oftentimes have to do with your health, social economic status as well, and the environment if you don't even have canopy shade trees. And so just want to remind you to stay hydrated, wear light colored clothes, pack an umbrella that you can use if you're walking, and apply sunscreen. Now, I want to give a quick announcement and then on to our topic theme song and our guests. And so, quick reminder that September 7th, Dr. Follow, one of my mentors, and Wendy Sherrills are hosting a community health fair, and that would be at the Jackie Robinson YMCA, where you can get your vaccination, your physical, mammograms, and so much more. Also, September 20th, Cedric, which I'm on the board, which is San Diego Religious Interfaith Collaborative, we are hosting an event on addressing the dangers of fentanyl, and that is on September 20th. You will hear that group of boards next week. And the location of that will be 6545 Alcala Knolls Drive in San Diego. Also, three other events. We have the Men's Health Forum on September 24th, and that will be at 9:30 a.m. And then also September 24th is the San Diego Black Family Empowerment Festival. And then October 23rd is San Diego's Hip Hop 5K at Jackie Robinson YMCA. And so I want to give a shout out of our Sunshine Award, and who is shining is all of the citizens and constituents that have called into your legislator to make sure they pass positive climate justice legislation. And Dave Rosenfield and many people on this panel has been part of that push to make sure that we either stop a horrible narrative that was in a bill, or make sure that we get either a bill opposed or passed. And so I want to just give props to everyone who was willing to make those calls. You get the Sunshine Award today. And we are going on to our topic theme song, and then I'm going to introduce our guests, and then we're going to dive into this conversation. So now we are going to hear from this all-star cast that worked diligently on a regular basis for energy justice. Not just energy justice, if I'm going to be real, it's revolutionary power with rooftop solar. And so who I want to introduce and who is on this cast is also my beloved climate avengers, is Karina Gonzalez. She is the Climate Justice Policy Manager with Hammond Climate Solutions. We also have Matt Vasilakis. He is the Co-Director of Policy with Climate Action Campaign, as well as Dave Rosenfeld. He is the Executive Director of the Solar Rights Alliance. And later we will be joining us will be Eddie Price, and he is the founder and CEO of the San Diego Urban Sustainability Coalition. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here. So, this conversation is on KNSJ 89.1 FM. So, let's talk about the future of our energy. And so, can someone share with me what that definition means? And I guess I'll start with Karina. Can you provide your perspective on our energy future and the benefits of, let's say, rooftop solar?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I want to start off, you mentioned Shalanda Baker earlier, and if folks haven't read her book, Revolutionary Power, I think that gives a really good context to this conversation and can provide some details into like what our future could look like. I hope that our future is clean power, clean local energy. We are not relying on fossil fuels. The first step really is making sure that rooftop solar is accessible to everyone in multifamily buildings, renters, so that we can get some energy independence and clean up our grid and lower rates.
No, that's great. And I agree with you on the revolutionary power, and that roadmap is so important. So I guess I'll go ahead and kind of like cut somewhat to the chase. And I want to ask Dave Rosenfield, can you provide some information or actually with some drama that took place towards the end of this legislative session for the state of California? And I guess I'll paint a quick picture, and I know you can provide even more details. So, for those that don't know, that the California Public Utilities Commission has been underway in addressing net energy metering as a policy for all rooftop solar owners throughout the state of California. And so we have worked diligently in pushing back on something they put out that it's been defined. I think, Dave, I really want to hear more from you, it could literally destroy the solar industry. So I'll stop there and kind of pass it on to you and give us some of those good old details and provide that drama, because it was some drama this week.
Yeah, there's 24 hours of drama. But I think, to just quickly take a step back, and kind of pivot off your first question is just like, what do we want, right? The system that works right now is we're dependent on utilities to supply our energy. It's expensive, it's dirty, it's unreliable. And so for working communities, that's been our only option. And that's been our only option for like 100, 150 years. And the consequences are pretty severe. And now for billions of years, and certainly for the 200,000 years that humans have been around, the sun has been there coming over our heads for free. And we have been harnessing the sun in all kinds of ways. And now we have this technology that we can stick on our roofs, and that we can gain some more control. We can gain some more independence. We can take some serious money and put it back in our pockets so we can buy our medicine and our bread and our milk and just all the things that we should be doing rather than giving it to a private utility. With a battery, we can then protect ourselves from blackouts. So if you're relying on your refrigerator to keep your medicine cold or run your dialysis machine, or you just can't afford to let a week's worth of groceries spoil, now you've got some options to do that. And the only question is just, and then what's amazing is 15 years ago, you had to be really rich to get this stuff. And today, you don't have to be either. And so that's why there's 1.5 million solar rooftops. And the only question that should be in our brains should just be, how do we get this into the hands of millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of working class and middle class families and churches and, houses of worship and the whole thing, everything that Karina just said. And, the utilities just don't want that to happen. And so they have been pushing to try to make it impossible for solar to get into the hands of middle and working class people and reverse the progress that we've made over the last 15 years. And they want to do it in two ways. One is they want to slash the credits that consumers get for sharing their extra solar energy with the grid. And we can talk more about that later. And the second is they want to tax people for just making solar energy to begin with. And the fight is happening at the California Public Utilities Commission, which is a government agency that regulates the utilities. I would argue not so well. And there's been a massive fight that's been going on for almost 2 years now. And it is now coming to the penultimate battle in late September. And there has been massive public opposition to the idea of taxing the sun. And so that's all it was. the utilities are getting nervous, we think, that we may have shown the CPUC that they cannot ruin rooftop solar. And so this week, there is a bill moving through the legislature that would extend Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. It's a separate issue. Many people on this call and many of your listeners may have an opinion about that. I know there's a lot of groups that are opposed to keeping it open for all kinds of reasons and spending billions of dollars to extend a nuclear power plant when we should just be doubling down on cleaner forms, but people will have their opinions about it. PG&E saw an opportunity. And so late on Sunday night, they released the legislation that was going to be voted on to extend Diablo Canyon. Today is the last day for this bill to be voted on, so not a lot of time. And inside this, thousands of words, thousands of sentences, there is a sentence that was really cleverly written that we know, because we've been in this fight for 2 years, is the solar tax. And once they got this passed, it would greenlight the CPUC later on in a month or so to basically just blow the solar tax up and give them what they wanted. And legislators had no idea that it was in there. And yesterday, I don't know how many people called and emailed their legislators, but I know that 16,000 people came to our website at like 9 a.m. And that was just one snapshot in time. And we do know that they were getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls. And by the middle of the day, the bill's authors and the governor's office came to solar advocates and said, what do you need? And so we worked out an agreement. So this is how it works, right? And we worked out an agreement that we can talk about the details, but the bottom line is we removed the threat from the table. And obviously the Diablo Canyon issue is still very much alive, and maybe it's actually gotten resolved, so I don't know, and somebody might know, but at least we removed the solar threat from the table, and it's not going to be the last time it's going to come up. This is not over, but it's an example of just, they will always keep trying to do it. And the people are quite powerful when they speak together. One of our members, Ramon Torres Madera, likes to say, if you speak with one voice, you are not heard. When many people speak, you are heard. And yesterday was a great example of that.
Yeah, love it. So I definitely want to get more into that too. But I want to hear from Matt. But before I mention that, is even when I called, it was almost like it was like robotic almost, because I called like 3 or 4 different legislators. Like they knew that Diablo one was one, and they was ready to hang up. But I had a list of other climate justice legislations that I wanted, them to pass. But it was funny. So I know they were inundated because it's like, okay, we got it. So Matt, you have been also on the front lines of us working on energy justice, even when it came down to our community choice energy. Now we have 2 in a county, but we're specifically talking about net energy metering solar. Can you provide your perspective on why it's so important for us to protect rooftop solar customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, solar is the linchpin for ensuring that we have a truly 100% clean energy, zero carbon future that's resilient to climate change. So, the way that the state has gone about its transition to clean energy, there's rooftop solar, which is great. It's local resources that were reliable in our communities and to the benefit of homeowners and small businesses. And then there's utility scale out in the desert, which can play an important role, but cannot be the basis for our clean energy future, as we see public power safety shutoffs that are being done from, or that are being completed from various wildfires and other situations. Now we've got heat waves. We have to shut those lines down to ensure that we're not causing more harm, and as a result, we don't have power. So the best way that we can avoid those types of situations is by having as much local distributed energy resources, or DERs, as possible, and that really starts with our own roofs and storage in our garages. And it's absolutely pivotal that we continue to encourage and incentivize those types of projects, those small scale projects, mom and pop projects, so that we have that resilient infrastructure, that clean energy when we need it, and we're not suffering from public power safety shutoffs, and we're not slowing down our transition to 100% clean energy, and that we can really start to hopefully tap down on the ever-changing climate that we're in now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, as you mentioned, in those remote places, they can just shut off those lines as long as they have like rooftop solar and batteries, right? And so that would also be a solution to address wildfires, that we do have wildfire threats in the county of San Diego. I mean, it's dry. I don't know if you guys remember the last time it rained. I know I don't. And if I do try to recall how many times it rained, just even probably in the last 6 months, I mean, is not scientific and it's not official, but I think I can probably count it on one hand. So knowing that we have such a desert-like climate terrain with the lack of that natural moisture, we are in threat of wildfires. So that rooftop solar, as you mentioned, our distributed energy resources, DER, is a solution from our energy perspective, but also in protecting our backcountry, protecting us from wildfires. So I definitely agree, and that is part of the language we use: local energy, local power, local generated power for our community choice energy. I recall that as well. So now we kind of want to dive into why should a person care about rooftop solar as an option, and how would that positively impact their electric bill? Because at the end of the day, a lot of times this money, and if it doesn't make dollars, it don't make sense, right? Or it comes down to what does make sense, and from a financial perspective. Who would like to kind of dive into that, or open us up with that discussion? Karina?
Sure. Yeah. So what a lot of people don't know is that, so people think, rooftop solar benefits rooftop solar users. And what people don't know, or may not know, is that rooftop solar saves every ratepayer money, whether you have solar on your roof or you don't, because it reduces the costs that utilities have to pay for new infrastructure, which they put on ratepayers. So ratepayers have to pay for those costs, and rooftop solar reduces those costs. So it's going to reduce rates for everyone. And that's the big thing right now, especially in San Diego, where we're paying the highest rates in the nation. SDG&E is charging ratepayers, and rooftop solar is going to save everyone money. There was a study done last summer that said that rooftop solar is going to save all ratepayers billions of dollars. And so
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Karina? Rooftop solar would do what?
save all ratepayers billions of dollars. So this isn't just a solar customer issue. It really it comes down to, it's going to put money back in the pockets of the people who need it. And in San Diego, where people are choosing whether to pay their electricity bill or buy food or pay their rent, this stuff really matters.
Yeah, and I believe that a lot of people don't even realize when they have those huge capital infrastructure projects, we pay that. It's the ratepayers. And the investor-owned utilities, that's another phrase for your electricity company that's a monopoly. The investor-owned utilities is the only industry that I know that have guaranteed profits.
Yeah.
Guaranteed profit. What other industry that has guaranteed profits? So, Dave, I want to hear from you as well, as far as like why should people care about this from an economic perspective?
Right. And so, I mean, there's the personal and then there's the community. And of course, the two are together. But from a personal standpoint, rooftop solar can cut your energy bill in a really, really profound and significant way. And then with the addition of a battery, as we've said, it can also then protect you from power outages. Now, and then the methods of access to get rooftop solar personally are just getting better and better. So obviously you can upfront finance it if you can get a cash or a loan. For many people, that's not an option. So leasing it, just like leasing a car, you can do that. And then there's what are called power purchasing agreements, where you don't actually own the panels, the solar company does, and you actually buy the electricity from the solar company. So you get basically a second bill, but that rate is much lower than what you'd be paying SDG&E. And it's flat, or at least it's predictable. They'll give you the contract will be whatever. So you're still paying, but you're paying a heck of a lot less than if you were just hooked on SDG&E and only using their energy. So obviously that's great. Now, not everybody owns their roof. So we've got and there is quite a lot of multifamily home solar, but not nearly enough. And so that's a big nut that we can crack. We can crack it with policy and organizing. And I'd love to talk about that too. And then, so that's a thing, but nonetheless, that's the opportunity. It's been growing. And the question is, how do you accelerate it? So that's the personal. Then on the community end, the only thing I would just add to what you two have said is, it's, yes, like if we just keep growing rooftop solar, I think the savings could be as much as like $120 billion over the next 30 years. But it's not theoretical, because in 2018 alone, the folks that run the grid canceled $2.6 billion worth of long distance power line projects because of rooftop solar and also energy efficiency, because it's kind
I'm
of the
sorry,
same
Glenn.
thing.
Can you repeat that one more time for my listeners? Because they may not
Yeah.
have really heard that or understand from a context perspective. So could you please repeat that? Because that's really important.
Yes, I agree. It's important, and it is a happy repeating to do. It's that in 2018 alone, the state regulators canceled $2.6 billion worth of long distance power line projects. And that's money that was on the table that was going to get charged to ratepayers,
Guaranteed
plus
profit.
plus the 7 to 10% guaranteed profit that the utilities get on top of that. And instead, they just canceled it and wiped it out. And that's just in 1 year. Protect Our Communities Foundation has done some excellent work that has figured out that there were two massive transmission line projects that were built over the last couple of years that collectively are going to cost about $10 billion over like the next 30 years, which we're now paying for. And what Protect Our Communities Foundation figured out is that if the state regulators had their heads screwed on straight, they could have more cheaply, they could have avoided building those power line projects if we had just gone bigger on rooftop solar and batteries in the areas in San Diego County and in Los Angeles County where those power line projects were intended to serve. So we could have saved $10 billion if our regulators really understood how to deploy and incentivize rooftop solar and batteries. So the opportunity for both the personal and society is obviously huge. We're not taking advantage of it nearly enough. And that's why it's the only question should just be, how do we accelerate this? And, the big nut to crack is more working class, more working communities, people both who own the roofs, but also people who don't own the roofs.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, I'll be honest with you, probably like many ratepayers with electricity, I didn't really think about it in the perspective or the light that I currently look into it now, right? So it's like I turn my switch on and I pay my bill. And so then when you start looking at your bill, and I've done it before years ago, you're like, well, why is it so high if I only generated this amount? What is distribution? What is, generation, right? I mean, what is distribution and what is transmission? And so when I look at my SDG&E bill, I mean, my transmission and distribution could be just as much as what I generate. And so when you're looking at using natural resources, the sun, Sustainable Urban Network, no, just playing. That was just a quick, shameless plug. But anyway, when you're looking at the sun as a resource and being able to really tap into a natural resources to give you what you need with electricity, I'm thinking you definitely will avoid that transmission and distribution charges that you're paying. That is part of those guaranteed profits that I don't know how many times over is that infrastructure project is already paid for.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah.
they get it built, they lock it in, they reap them the profits for decades, all on the backs of ratepayers. And of course, we need these projects to some extent, but we could be avoiding so many of these projects, saving so many people money, and then they get the rooftop solar and batteries. So it's just like win, 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 win. And the only one that loses is the utility profit margin. That's the only thing that loses in this equation. And that's what this fight is all about.
Yes.
I also want to add that economic, benefits are important, but, arguably more important is like the climate and climate justice angle. Like we are seeing more and more reports come out that say that we need to get off of fossil fuels. We need to transition to renewable energy, and it needs to happen, 5 years ago. So, what the Public Utilities Commission is trying to do, it will make it harder for people to go solar. We're going to increase the amount of dirty energy that we use, and who suffers? It's our frontline communities, our climate justice communities who, are on the front lines and, whose public health has been permanently affected by fracking operations across the state. And, those communities are primarily Black and Brown. And now they're the ones that are disproportionately dying from COVID. And so, these are the things that matter too. Economics, we're going to save money, but we need a planet to live on. And this is a big, big piece of the puzzle.
I am so glad you said that from a policy perspective, because that is kind of leads into, thank you for sharing those details, Karina, because this also kind of leads into another question that I have is that I know that our previous state senator Kevin DeLeon had, Senate Bill 100, right? And that is for the state of California to get to 100% clean energy. So, one of my questions and my concerns is with the policy that came out of the California Public Utilities Commission, and this is just from my processing, right? And I would love to hear you guys' processing too, because that doesn't mean my processing is completely, accurate, right? Is that what we found in the California Public Utilities Policy on Net Energy Metering 3, NEM 3, for rooftop solar, literally threatens our state legislation in reaching 100% clean energy. It seemed like it's almost like a conflict of interest, if you will. But I would love to hear from you all of what you think about that.
I mean, not only from a state perspective does it compromise our ability to hit 100% clean energy, but at a local level, for all of the cities that have climate action plans, rooftop solar is again the linchpin of meeting those targets.
Right.
So, if our cities and our communities are saying, we need to incentivize and create as much local distributed energy resources, as much solar and storage as possible, our communities to hit our legally binding climate action plan targets. And the state heads in the exact opposite direction and undercuts our local communities' abilities to have that option, that choice, then what's the point? We're not going to be able to hit our targets. So yes, definitely from a state level we're going to be missing out, but at a local level we're going to undercut our local climate efforts.
I'm so glad you brought up that local effort or local perspective, Matt, because I mean, Climate Action Campaign was a huge, underpinning on us getting legally binding, as you mentioned, climate action plan for the city of San Diego. And as well as we have a climate action plan with the county and as well as other cities within the county. And considering that San Diego is the second largest county in the state of California, right? So it seems like to me, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on this, that if our state policy, if this policy with our state agency, which is the Public Utilities Commission, and like you said, was legally binding from a state legislative, but as well as our local binding, let's say the city of San Diego climate action plan to get to 100% clean energy by 2035, it seems like that policy may more incentivize fossil fuel than clean energy. Is that possible?
It's going to incentivize inefficient, expensive, and honestly anti-consumer approaches to achieving 100% clean energy. That's going to mean, to what Dave and Karina were talking about earlier, expensive transmission lines that go out of state to procure nuclear energy, utility scale resources, destroying natural habitats in other places, leaving us vulnerable to public power safety shutoffs as a result of higher climate change impacts. And it's going to cost us a ton more money than it would have if we had been building all those resources on our own roofs and our garages with solar and storage. So, there's a way to go about, fighting climate change that really relies on a top-down model. And we do not want to approach it that way, because we know that when we approach things from the top down, we're going to be leaving folks behind. It's going to be inequitable. We're going to be leaving frontline communities at the mercy of the climate crisis. And what we need to do is really bottom up and give people the agency and the option to, take the power literally in their own hands.
Right.
Put it on their own roofs and have it in their own garages, and that will result in better outcomes. And it connects people to the issue much more. They're doing their part, which is what millions of Californians have been doing for over a decade, doing their part, and which is why it's critically important for us to continue to fight for a strong NEM program, to not break that promise, and to continue to spread that opportunity to more folks, especially working class communities of color and in communities of concern.
Power to the people. So one
Power
of
to the people.
power to the people, like literally power to the people, right?
It never gets old. Power to the people.
It
Seriously.
never gets old. It never gets old. And so, one of the things I was inspired by, I was on a national NAACP environmental meeting, and we are talking about really kind of breaking down what's in that Inflation Reduction Act, what may needs to get tweeted, where our position is in general. And of course, they're like, and I asked, like, where are we at with that man shine? Nope, we're opposing it. Good. Okay, that's great, right? But also is that it provides resources to the people, down to the people, the Inflation Reduction Act, to help people make that investment for rooftop solar. So there is that element within that bill that it trickles really down to everyday people. And so that is something really exciting, and that is something that we need to know, but also something that we need to make sure that other people know too, so we can literally expand the benefits of rooftop solar to those multifamily homes, because that is a big issue. And I kind of want to pivot there, but before then, Dave, I think you wanted to say something.
Oh, well, I just wanted to, I think Matt from Climate Action Campaign, just kind of talking about just like how the cascading effect of making rooftop solar impossible for everyday people to afford will impact policy at every level, including the San Diego County and the surrounding areas, and all the work that Climate Action Campaign has been just hustling over the last few years to get elected officials on the right page. Just one thing that just a big picture thing that just was made clear to me a few weeks ago is over the next decade and some, but basically let's call it the next decade, the California law says that it is going to take all of the energy right now that we currently purchase from Chevron, Exxon, Shell, all the cars and the internal combustion engines that we burn, right? All the furnaces that run on gas and the air conditioners and all that kind of thing. We're going to take all of that, right? All of it, think of all this energy that we buy from Shell, and we're going to basically flip it to renewable energy, and then we're going to stuff it through SDG&E, PG&E, and SoCal Edison's wires. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, like, that's a really, really hard undertaking. Like, what we're about to do in a decade is something that is almost harder than putting a person on the moon. And like, the California law commits us to doing it. We have these laws on the books. And the thing is like, just solar alone, like, we have to do this with wind, and we got to do geothermal, and we got to do all these things. But solar alone, the state is saying that we need, and it doesn't matter, these numbers won't make any sense to anyone, but we need like between 90 and 100 gigawatts of solar alone. And right now we do less than 30 gigawatts. And so we have to like triple the amount of solar that we currently have in the state. And that's just one piece of the pie. Just in the next decade, just even have a fighting chance at this whole thing. And you can't do it with solar in the desert alone. Like, even if you wanted to, like Matt's gone through all the reasons why you wouldn't want to do that, but you actually just can't. It takes too long to do the permitting and the siting and all the things. And Native Americans have something to say about this, and the turtles actually have something to say about this.
Our backcountry, you got to protect some of that as well.
Some of that, right? So, California has these things. And so you have to, if you kill rooftop solar, then it's a leg of the stool, and the whole thing starts to collapse. And this is before you even talk about like, why would I go get an electric car if you're not going to let me charge it with the sun, and you're going to force me to have to pay, like, charge it with SDG&E's into expensive electricity? So consumers aren't going to go for the part that they're being told that they have to do. And probably people will just rebel and go like, no way, I'm not doing that. So anyway, it's just adding on to Matt's thing that like, this is very much interactive with what the state says that they want to do to get off fossil fuels and give us a fighting chance at, stopping the worst effects of climate change. So, this is big what we're trying to do.
Yes, I want to also share that I agree. It is a transformational. I mean, this is a energy transformational moment, right? As well as a movement. And so it's a transformational power. And so if we can transform this power to the people, again, allowing them to power themselves, as well as building an aggregated rooftop system that they can even potentially power their neighbors, that is something that really motivates and inspires me to stay in this fight, and work towards that. I want to share just a quick fact that our listeners on KNSJ 89.1 FM are unfamiliar with. The each person on this call is a member of the Solar Rights Alliance, right? So Sustainable Urban Network is, I know the Hammond Climate Solutions is, and Climate Action Campaign, as well as many others. And so the reason why I bring that up is because the Solar Rights Alliance has been doing like this press conference West Coast tour And so, Dave, I want to ask if you could share some of this press information that we've been really, that you've been able to work with us local folks here in San Diego, as well as other parts in California, on the need to protect our solar customers and the need to make sure we don't tax the sun.
Yeah, sure. And just one clarification, and this is consistent with the spirit of what you just said. So what you just said is yes, everyone is a member of the Save California Solar Coalition, and Solar Rights Alliance is one of those organizations.
Right.
So is SUN, so is the Climate Action Campaign, Hammock Climate Solutions Foundation. And so this is part of this umbrella coalition, a coalition of the willing to save California solar that includes 600 nonprofit organizations, cities, school districts, businesses, all the things. And, this solar tax is a real threat. This idea that they want to literally tax you for putting solar panels on your roof. And this could be as much as $700 a year, just again, for putting solar panels on your roof to effectively wipe out the savings that you would get from it, which is what they want. And there's been a lot of work to protest this. And I think as people here know, people have been literally marching in the streets. So starting on June 2nd, all the way to the very last day of July, there were rallies and protests in San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Cathedral City out in Coachella Valley, Bakersfield, San Luis Obispo, Fresno, Santa Cruz, and Chico. And in San Francisco and in Los Angeles, there were over 1,000 people at each event. At San Francisco, that was when the Public Utilities Commission, which are the decision makers here, they were meeting, and there was a line out the door and around the block in San Francisco to go and speak to them. In Los Angeles, hundreds of people videotaped a video comment. It was the largest one-day submission of public comments in Public Utilities Commission history. And that was the inaugural events in those two cities. And then you three, as well as I think probably about 60 to 80 other San Diegans, kicked off then the tour after that. And we started in San Diego. And then there were just, dozens and dozens of people at every single event. And I would just say for people, for your listeners are going, is anyone listening? At every single event, every single TV station, radio station, and major newspaper was on hand to cover the event. And this is important because I think we're not only advocates, but we want to be effective. When even just one TV station shows up, then millions of people hear our cry. And this is part of why we think we have been able to delay the CPUC's effort to try to do the bidding of PG&E and the utilities, is that what they're doing is incredibly unpopular and people are hearing about it. And for the listeners, the people on this podcast were instrumental in that series of events. And if you showed up at these events or you've called or written, you have been as well. And what's crazy is this is just one thing, that's of all the things that we've been doing over the last 2 years, but it was tremendous. And it really put a marker in the sand of like, people don't want a solar tax. It's absurd to tax the sun.
Yeah, because I remember, I believe it was December, like the beginning of December, when the California Public Utilities Commission came out with NEM 3.0. And we were just like, oh no, this is not going to work.
Oh no,
right?
that's right.
And there was supposed to be a vote in January. And that's when, like you said, we started flooding, the calls, statewide, right? We all just worked together collectively. And I want to say January 27th, but I don't, again, it's been a while, right?
That's correct. That was supposed to be the day that
they
were going to vote on it. It was cooked. It was going to happen. Yeah.
Because there was a lot of drama, right? We're like, oh my gosh, and they postponed that vote, and then they punted it again. They were supposed to vote again. I can't remember. You guys would know. What was that second vote supposed to be?
Well, it never got rescheduled, and instead it was just radio silence and radio silence and radio silence. And then in May, so this is months after they were supposed to do something, they dropped a document that basically said, hey everyone, we're thinking of some new ideas. We want to know what you think. And this is on May 9th. And it literally included the same things that they had put on the table in December with different packaging. It was a solar tax. It was deep cuts to the credits that consumers get for sharing their extra energy with the grid. And so they must have just thought we were stupid. It's just, how could it be possibly the case after 150,000 people either wrote or called or marched, newspaper editorials, 600 organizations, and then the best they could do was to just give you the same thing. And so then we had to do the same thing all over again. And we think September 29th is when we're going to see the next revision. Everything that happened yesterday in a lot of ways was just another detour in this just insane fight that we're having because the utilities are relentless. So yeah, if anyone's listening, if you think this sounds crazy, it's because it is crazy.
Yeah, go ahead, Karina. I think you want to add something there.
Yeah, just that, this proceeding has been going on for 2 years. Commissioners have gone and left the commission.
The president
and
even
it's
got
still
replaced,
happening.
right? Yeah.
And in between, which is, typical utility tactics, they're throwing in legislation, they're throwing in, other roadblocks that we need to get through. And all while this is still going on and we still have to put effort into fighting this at, every CPUC meeting, there's callers calling in saying, please don't tax the sun. And we're just fighting, legislation on top of that. And it's exhausting. It's been an exhausting 2 years. And, I've had reporters that reached out to the coalition to cover this in like February of last year, and they're reaching back out. It's now, almost September, and they're like, wait, that's still a thing? It's still happening? And so it's been a really long fight, but I think it's a testament to the coalition's effective organizing that we've been able to delay this decision for so long, and that we've been able to, keep the pressure on the governor and the Public Utilities Commission to really get them to think through what their next step is.
And just on that, like just to kind of really punctuate that, I mean, I thought the alley-oop, the whole coalition alley-oop is like, it's real, right? Like, because Karina, you remember this like maybe it was a month and a half ago when the CPUC tried to basically repackage their, terrible proposal again. And people down here were going bananas on Nextdoor. And there was a TV reporter who has solar, and she was just on her Nextdoor group and saw people just raging about this, and then called me and said, I'd like to interview, a solar homeowner. And then I call you, and then she goes to your house, and then she calls a bunch of other people, and then millions of people hear the story. And so it's like, there's no one person or group that has created this, this massive public opposition. It has really been just like one alley-oop to another, to another, to another, to another. And it's really cool to watch, over something like this, I have to say.
Yeah, and you're right, and you're not sure. I mean, for me, it's really been inspiring to see how many people are in support of this. Because even with the Protect Our Communities Foundation, we went on a road tour as well, and doing presentations all throughout the city of San Diego, and asked them, like you said, we had a list of, here's your legislator, here's the governor, these are the steps to call, and just to see how many people have been engaged and wanting to make sure that we protect this natural resource. And I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, I can't get into like too many details that I don't know as far as mismanaging our taxes, but I just don't think that we should be taxed for a natural resource, right? We were not taxed before, and so I just, again, I don't know, just being transparent, I don't know the legality of it, but it just doesn't seem right. It doesn't sit well with me on that. So so now I think you talked about a little bit of that most recent push that we just had, another, with the Diablo Canyon legislation. And I'm almost certain there was like another bill, I think it was like AB 2677, that may also address that in a sneaky type of way too. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Dave or Karina. If not, we can just move on because there's so many other, things that we can talk about on this. So we talked about our communities of concern, our lower moderate customers as well. So I'm just really curious as far as, where do you think about having that behind the meter solutions with on-bill financing? Because that's something else that's at the proceedings with the California Public Utilities Commission too, as a solution. And I personally would love to see like our community choice energy agencies such as San Diego Community Power, as well as the Clean Energy Alliance, actually really leverage and apply on-bill financing for our multifamily unit homes as well as apartments as well. And that's a way, I believe, to help extend and make it more accessible for others to participate with clean energy with rooftop solar. I'm just curious of what your thoughts are as well. Oh, are you? Go ahead.
I'm looking at Matt.
Oh,
You go first, Karina.
Yeah. So, there's solar has become more accessible, but there are still a lot of barriers that need to be addressed. And the biggest, arguably the biggest barrier is that people aren't homeowners and they don't own their roofs. And on-bill solar financing can really overcome this barrier. And it's already been, there's a successful program in Hawaii. It's been proven that it works, and it gives renters access to solar. And so, the more that we can do to make solar more accessible, we should be doing it. I also want to touch on, you mentioned multifamily. There are statewide programs that give incentives for multifamily affordable housing to go solar, which is great, but there are barriers within that program as well. The incentive gets paid, after installation. And a lot of affordable housing owners can't afford to float that cost. So we really need to think about some bold policies and redesigning these really great programs so that they can be used effectively. So, paying the rebate upfront is something that should be considered in order to make these programs more successful and more accessible, because like I mentioned, when the rebate's paid at the end, a lot of people just don't have that upfront capital to make that happen.
Right.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And hopefully that Inflation Reduction Act could be also a resource to develop a program in order to offset and cover those upfront installation charges as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for multifamily homes, the definitely the biggest thing we can do is first we have to just make it in property owners' interest. And so we do have to, provide an incentive to have them if they're going to retrofit an apartment building. It exists. It's riddled with just bureaucracy. So, a lot of property owners are like, the heck with this, I'm just not going to bother. The sum of monies that are available are actually pretty good. There's just a lot of, bureaucracy, and we ought to just make it bigger and more ambitious over the next 10 years. We don't have to do it forever, but for the next 10 years where we have this huge thing, why, we should just blow that thing up. And then the other thing is there's a wonky policy that's called virtual net metering. That's really, really, really important, because it's the way that then the solar energy on an apartment building, that the savings can flow to the renters inside the building, even though they don't own the panels. And right now the CPUC only allows virtual net metering to happen in the most low income census tracts. And effectively, but that's absurd, because what we know is that actually the pathway out of poverty is to actually encourage and allow people to live everywhere, so that they have neighbors that are all socioeconomic categories, and children go to school with people in all socioeconomic categories. And so whether this is intentional or not, the CPUC's policy effectively just ghettoizes the whole thing, as opposed to like blowing it up and kind of really creating solar as an opportunity for all kinds of renters and encouraging people to live in all kinds of neighborhoods of their choosing. And so that's a real problem. And we've been asking the CPUC to allow virtual net metering to happen all over the state. And so by making SOMA, which is the name of the program that subsidizes multifamily home, bigger and less bureaucratic, by allowing virtual net metering to happen all over the state in any kind of multifamily home context, so that then people have the freedom to be able to just go wherever they want to live and take advantage of it. And then let's just have 1 million solar powered batteries, like just have a big, big, big goal of just let's get 1 million solar powered batteries deployed, just like what Governor Schwarzenegger did in 2015 with rooftop solar, 1 million solar rooftops. Then, these could be the building blocks, and then it's still gonna be hard. Everything's gonna be hard. But these are, we know we have a pathway on how we can accelerate and have the next decade be truly the decade where it's solar for the working class, just pure and simple.
So as we're starting to, thank you, Dave, for that. So as we're starting to wrap up here on this really important policy that's taking place, that's currently underway in the state of California, I want to just hear personally, and I will start with you, Matt, if you can just provide your personal views of why this is important to you personally, as well as collectively from a community perspective as well.
Yeah, well, I think personally, as the climate crisis accelerates, like I want to know that the lights are going to be on. Last night, actually, SDG&E had a planned safety shut off. They were doing some repairs in our area, and they ended up going longer than expected, and a lot of the food in the fridge is spoiled. So that different than a situation with the climate crisis, but collectively, we don't want that in our society. We don't want that for our communities. We want to be able to keep the lights on, and that again needs to be done in a way that's bottom up, that's centered in equity, and that is providing for those that are most vulnerable first and foremost.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Karina, can you share your thoughts on why this is so important to you personally, as well as collectively from a community perspective?
Yeah, so I think we already touched on a lot of the reasons. I think the biggest piece of the puzzle here is obviously the climate angle. Like I mentioned, our frontline communities, they're suffering. We're seeing devastating effects of the climate crisis across California and San Diego. There's at the same time that there's a drought over here, there's massive flooding over here. And so we're seeing those effects now. It's not going away. It's not, the climate crisis is coming, the climate crisis is here, and we need to do everything that we can to transition off of fossil fuels. I also, think that this is an opportunity to look at, how the investor-owned utilities function and look at, we mentioned their guaranteed rate of return, their guaranteed profit on building new infrastructure that we pay for. It makes no sense. And I think this is an opportunity for, everybody involved in this coalition to start really looking at how we can reform the entire investor-owned utility model into something that works, into something that makes sense for the people, and really just take the power away from this monopoly that's been fueling our climate crisis.
Thank you for your thoughts on that, Karina. I agree with you. And Dave, did you want to kind of leave with some of your thoughts as we were wrapping up today's show?
I mean, just every single thing that we can do, like right now in this moment, to put more, make more clean energy and make less dirty energy, is like, it's a down payment on our own lives and the lives of our community. And it averts potentially suffering for trillions of people over the next 1,000 years. So it's like everything you do. So it may not be enough, like to what we want it to be, but it sure can be a lot. And I think that, that for me is why this matters, is this little thing on this little patch of dirt that we're doing at this very moment that seems really hard. It just feels worth it to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for joining us today on S.U.N. Sustainable Urban Network, where we are bringing our cast of climate avengers to address solar energy. We appreciate it. And check us out next week, where we're going to have Cedric on here to talk about the dangers of fentanyl and their event that will be coming up soon. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to S.U.N. Sustainable Urban Network.